Hello, my name is Kaylee Eakin. This is the end of the semester class presentation for Washington State University's Strategic Communication Graduate Program course entitled Persuasion for Professional Communicators. At the beginning of the semester, we were instructed to select a social issue or a political issue and create a Facebook page about it, and later apply principles of strategic communications to demonstrate the gravity of the issue and to advocate for the improvement of it. The social issue I chose is poverty in America, specifically affecting children. Over the past few months, I have been curating the news on the issue, linking news stories, videos, and advertisements, and I have also included examples of various types of persuasive messages and appeals, which I'll be explaining later during the presentation. I hope you enjoy it. In order to make good use of our time, I'm going to briefly comment on some of the articles, videos, and pictures I posted. I will also expand on the 3 required posts throughout the semester. As you can see from my Facebook template, there is some irony presented in the 2 pictures I use. The American flag, as we know, represents freedom and opportunity. The United States is known as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, countries in the world. Yet at the same time, it is plagued with poverty. These 2 photos, displayed back to back, really make you wonder how one of the wealthiest countries in the world has a nearly 22% poverty rate for children under the age of 18. One of the very first things I posted to my Facebook advocacy site was an article printed in the New York Times illustrating data from the Census Bureau that shows where the poor live. Oftentimes, we don't realize something affects us, so we don't think there is need to educate ourselves on the matter. In order to increase the persuasiveness of my site, I needed people to realize that this issue hits closer to home than people may comprehend. When you click on this link, you are brought to a page depicting a map of the United States. Then you are free to locate the area in which you live. Since I've already visited this page, the site has already located my hometown, Richland. If I hover my mouse over the city, it tells me that there is an 8.8% poverty rate in this area. The site comes up with this information based on the federal government's defined poverty line, which is $23,550 a year for a family of 4. This is an article from MSNBC that explains how our country's educational system is failing our children. It also demonstrates how poor academic performances plague American Indian students both on and off federal lands. Here, I wrote and posted an opinion piece that sadly celebrates the 50th birthday for America's war on poverty. It briefly talks about our country's status in the year 2014. This is an article from the Huffington Post explaining how children represent our country's future. That's a pretty important role that should be taken seriously. In order to set our youth up for success and ease poverty for generations to come, a strong educational system is essential. This is a great article from Ed Central, revealing evidence that emotional stress arising from living in poverty impedes on children's educational development. Poverty and insufficient education really go hand in hand and contribute to the reoccurring cycle. Better, more effective education is needed to empower children and relieve them from the generational cycle that ensues from our country's poor family financial circumstances. This is the first required item. During week 5 of this course, we learned about the ways in which message persuasiveness is influenced by message structure, message content, or the order in which a request is made. The item I chose to include demonstrates how message content, specifically fear appeals, affect persuasiveness. A children's organization that focuses on poverty, known as Barnados, launched an ad campaign that showcased newborn babies ingesting disgusting things, such as a cockroach and a bottle of methylated spirits, which is an ethanol that contains additives to make it poisonous. It's extremely foul-smelling and is marked with an awful taste in order to discourage consumption. The ad reads, "There are no silver spoons for children born into poverty." Based on our readings, I would argue that the advertisement is persuasive because it elicits the duality of fear and disgust. However, being that the ad was banned after Advertising Standards Authority ruled it to be too shocking due to the record number of complaints, I have to contend otherwise. Authors Morales, Wu, and Fitzsimmons state that In the dark contrast of fear, disgust can be associated with a strong sense of certainty. A disgusted person is certain what the problem is, knows how to deal with it, and is confident in his or her ability to do so. I believe that so much outrage ensued from this advertisement due to the fact that people are only informed of what the problem is and not how to deal with it. They only know who to contact for help. To explain, the ad writes, "Baby Amy is 2 minutes old. Poverty has already mapped out her future. Poverty is waiting to destroy Amy's hope and joy, and is likely to lead her to a future of alcoholism. We can't end poverty, but we can provide the practical skills that Amy and thousands of others need to stop it from predetermining their lives. Don't let poverty destroy a future. Please call this number or visit this website." If the practical skills were listed on the ad, I think it would have better conformed to the author's theory that disgust elicits certainty. Materials from the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention's training library caution that messages may do more harm than good. For example, scare tactics should be avoided. O'Keefe writes that, "Perhaps as materials become very intense, then less fear might be aroused and persuasive effects will weaken. This represents the idea that the persuader might go too far in using fear appeals." It appears as though Barnado's ad did just that. Though poverty is indeed a threat to innocent children, I think this message went too far. This notion is proven by the fact that it was banned due to public outrage. This fact sheet, originated by DoSomething.org, is eye-opening. It lists 11 facts about education and poverty in America. For instance, less than 30% in the bottom quarter of incomes enroll in a 4-year school. Among that group, less than 50% graduate. In an article depicting 30 of the most powerful images, one is of a boy who is seen crying at his teacher's funeral, who helped him escape poverty through music. This is the second required item. During week 6 of this course, we learned about inoculation communication strategies that persuade. An inoculation statement is typically a one-page document that is aimed at preparing and equipping the reader to evade persuasion of a message, which they will soon be introduced to. The inoculation treatment I posted is entitled "An Academic Smackdown, Refuting the Absurd Social Science Claim that Poverty is in Our Genes," written by Chauncey DeVega. He aims at refuting potential persuasion to the theory that poverty is predetermined by our genetics through a logic-based argument. According to the reading, "Inducing Resistance to Conspiracy Theory Propaganda, Testing Inoculation and Meta-Inoculation Strategies," threat is a motivational component of inoculation. It forewarns a persuasive attack. The information the inoculation communicator, whom in this case is Chauncey DeVega, equips you with is intended to protect you from the psychological appeal of a conspiracy theory, which in this case is that poverty is genetic-based. Authors Banas and Miller note that by preemptively preparing people to protect themselves, an inoculation strategy has the potential to inhibit conspiracy theory persuasion by preventing the conspiratorial mindset from taking hold and promoting an appropriate degree of skepticism towards conspiratorial claims. I believe this inoculation treatment to be extremely effective in persuasion. The author specifically states "you are forewarned" and uses terminology such as fairy tale, toxic, venom, lies, erroneous assumption, bad data, and poor methodology to explain their original document. He explains how the original text, entitled "Poverty is in Our Genes," exhibits misunderstood facts that are based on a lack of knowledge and uncritical theoretical framework. The author provides the reader with logical evidence that the message they will soon be exposed to is invalid, yet persuasive, being that it was highlighted in a well-known science magazine. Quoting a sentence straight from the inoculation treatment, DeVega states, "Post-racial discourse is predictated upon an erroneous assumption. In the shadow of the Holocaust, old-fashioned racism was slayed by the civil rights movement and its allies in the academic, social justice, and scientific communities." He goes on to say that claims of biological determinism are just too antiquated and primitive to be taken seriously. Please feel free to read the entire inoculation statement on your own time to see just how persuasive it can be. I decided to include this YouTube video in Poverty in America's Facebook page due to the element of emotional appeals and persuasive effect that results. I created this video myself a few years ago during a video art course at the University of Washington. I decided to partake in a little social experiment to see what people thought about poverty. I backed it with an emotionally impactful song by Brandon Heath called Give Me Your Eyes. It is very interesting to gain insight from real people. I encourage you to watch the rest of this when you have a moment. This post bridges back to my original post on Where Does Poverty Live? I wanted to keep my readers engaged and remind them that they are affected by poverty, equipping them with another visual representing where poverty lives. The next post provides the reader with the comparative visual between the total workforce representing impoverished people and the total workforce representing educated people. If we're seeking answers to poverty, it only makes sense to compare the two, and through comparison, we find that the power of education speaks loudly. This post exemplifies another opinion piece that was written by yours truly. Here, I dabbled into the world of child labor and discovered how putting kids to work interferes with their quality of education. This is the third required item. During week 7 of this course, we learned about central and peripheral processing and how the route in which we comprehend something explains the potential persuasion of it. In order to process information through the central route rather than the peripheral route, the message recipient needs to be an active participant in the persuasion process. The link I posted to my site does just that. It involves the user. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops launched this video, which is basically an online tour of what social characteristics define someone as living on the poverty line. Understanding the merits of the message requires that you compare your own finances, job, food choices, modes of transportation, and even childcare situations to life on the poverty line. This video speaks in a way that increases your motivation and ability to interpret the message. According to research, this video should be highly effective in persuading people that poverty in the United States is a serious issue, but they hold the power to make the difference. To explain, by joining the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, you can join others who are changing policies that affect people's lives. Applying your own life and your ability to make a difference involves the user in the content. According to Booth, Butterfield, and Wellborn, the central route to persuasion involves effortful processing of attitude-relevant information to determine the merits of the persuasive communication. How do we know persuasive efforts have worked in this case? Because of the elaboration likelihood model. Being that there is said to be just 2 different routes in which we process information, it is possible to predict which one you will likely use to decipher a message prior to being exposed to it. The mode in which this is done is through the elaboration likelihood model, which is a framework for studying the processes in which certain aspects of a message influence people to change their attitudes. Elaboration likelihood model can be influenced mainly by 2 different factors. Booth Butterfield claims that people are more likely to exert a considerable elaborative effort in some situations and much less in others, depending on their levels of motivation and ability. In other words, motivation and ability influence how our attitudes are formed and changed. If an individual is highly involved in the issue, motivation to elaborate on the merits of the message should increase and therefore lead to central root processing. On the other hand, if an individual is highly uninvolved in the issue, motivation to elaborate on the merits of the message should decrease and therefore lead to peripheral route processing. Ability is the second main factor to influence elaboration likelihood model. Who do you think will be drawn to this online tour? Most likely people who are motivated to discover more information about the poverty in America. The abilities required to interpret the message are minuscule. The tour equips the reader with all the information they need to know in order to determine whether or not they are currently living on the poverty line. This video is indeed persuasive. My third opinion piece discusses how we as adults can and should empower our country's youth to take charge of their lives. They have the right, granted to them by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, to be free of oppression. Tainting a child's journey through education, which is meant to build them into confident, intelligent, and capable adults, is a form of oppression. In order for our rights to hold weight, they must be upheld by laws. America needs a better education law. The Washington Post wrote an article that explains why America's youth deserves a better education law, which is a great follow-up to my opinion piece. Our readings over the semester suggest that people are more likely to trust and thus be persuaded by someone of high credibility opposed to someone of low credibility. The Washington Post article strengthens my opinion piece. This link reveals demographics and population characteristics regarding the condition of education and children living among poverty. In 2012, 21% of school-aged children in the United States were living in families of poverty. That's 1/5 of the population. Child Fund International and GlobalCitizen.org shows people how they can make a difference. Through these two websites, you can get involved in helping children affected by poverty by ensuring they be free of exploitation and have access to primary education by signing a petition that demonstrates to the government that your priority is our youth. In a recent lecture from my professor in a course called Brand Development, I discovered that the persuasion theory called consistency suggests that we as human beings tend to follow through with our promises because we want to be seen as reliable. Once we make a choice or take a stand, we will encounter personal and interpersonal pressures to behave consistently with that commitment. In order for commitments to be the most effective, they need to be seen as self-generated or internally motivated. They also need to be public. People feel compelled to follow through with commitment when they know people know about it. These two posts are strategically placed on this Facebook to persuade others to commit to the social issue and the improvement of it. This video is heartbreaking, yet impactful illustration of how child poverty rates in the United States continue to worsen. The federal government even predicts that by the time a child reaches the age of 18, there's a 50% chance they will be living on food stamps. Nearing the end of the semester, I wanted people to actually be able to see what poverty looks like through the eyes of our country's children. This video allows the user to gain a different perspective of the issue, from the standpoint of those who are directly affected. They too hear, feel, understand, and are hurt by the economic stresses that we as adults encounter. An effective persuasive tactic is demonstrating the similarities between the user and the source and allowing them to be able to relate to the message. This picture is a quick little reminder that the path toward adequate education and the path toward poverty are two separate roads. So, which road looks more promising to you? This concludes my presentation on poverty in America, specifically affecting children. The alleviation of poverty exists within education. As a country, we need to band together and demand for a better education law.